The missing just got really crazy. Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for The Missing, season one. Not season one. I feel like it's going to be season one though at this point because the way this episode worked, this episode honestly felt like a season finale. It really did. This is my review for The Missing, episode 5, Molly, and yeah, really, this episode felt like a season finale. That's how big this episode really was. I mean, there were some huge revelations in this episode. This honestly felt like it should have been the half point of the season episode because this episode was extremely huge. It was the screenplay was by far the best in this, and I loved everything this episode was trying to show. I love the way it was done, and definitely, we found a lot of things this episode. We found out why we haven't seen Ian in the past. We found out what's happened to Ian's wife and things like that, and I definitely really enjoyed that. We also find out what Vincent's true intentions are. And I thought overall this was by far the best episode of the season. Loved it, and let's just get to it. So, the opening scene, of course, every single episode so far has started with a new character. And this one's a little bit different. We go to in the middle of a private yacht lounging on the deck, and we see this middle-aged or older woman. And in just the first few minutes, we see that, basically, Ian's, of course, was missing. He was presumed dead, of course. We found that out in the last episode. And we see, there's Ian. He pops up on deck to greet the woman, and he's looking alive. So, that is like, what? Because, especially when we find out in the present, that doesn't make any, in the past, that doesn't make any sense. So he seems to have left his troubled life on land in favor of the isolation. So basically, Ian's still alive and he's hiding from the rest of the world. So that's really weird. So back in 2006, Emily and Tony, along with Mark, have come to the mayor's office to present the evidence for last week's other big revelation, which is when Tony found out that Ian and Vincent are somehow connected. Or at least they know each other, of course. So the problem is there isn't actually any evidence to present. There's only Tony's word that both Ian and Vincent separately told the exact same story, which was a parable about guilt being like cancer, and the exact same story was told the exact same way by two people who have no knowledge of each other. That's basically what he said. So, we do know that Tony's word doesn't go very far in Chelan Dubois, and the police are baffled as to why Tony suspects the man who put 100 grand to find Oliver. And it makes sense, of course, because Vincent's their main suspect right now. So Emily then chimes in, pleading for them to just take a look, just a quick interjection. But it kind of seems, what's interesting is that this kind of seems like the first time that Emily's actually been on the same page with Tony. I mean, it seems like she hasn't been on the same page with him. It was cool to see that, definitely. So, basically, it's interesting to also see him kind of take action for the first time, too. I mean, they're both taking action. Tony was taking action first, but now Emily's taking action as well. So, we've seen it being handled very differently, as I've said. Like, Emily, has been crying and praying and cooperating with the police, while Tony's been, like, wanting answers pronto and doing whatever he can to find his son. So, I think that's really interesting. So, they hop into their car and head to the lake where Tony knows Vincent fishes, and Emily realizes that this means Tony must have been stalking Vincent in some capacity, and she kind of gets cold feet because of that. So, the second Vincent sees Tony, he shrinks away in terror, because, of course, he's threatened him so many times, but he's done with pretending to have any sort of tact or discretion. He strolls up, socks him right in the face, and Vincent won't talk, but no matter what, Tony finds the proof he needs, and that's because Ian's number is in Vincent's phone. So he beats the guy to a pulp, forcing him to confess that Ian paid for his alibi. Tony gets back in the car, his hands are shaking, and he tells Emily that he plans to keep his plans to meet Ian at a bar later in order to confront him. And Vincent's barely able to let him alone stand up. He lies in a bloody heap on the grass while he calls Ian to tell him what happened. And this was very interesting when he said that. I'm like, okay, what does this mean? He says 4 words, and that is Tony Hughes, he knows. And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Obviously, Ian is pissed off. He didn't keep his mouth, he didn't keep his mouth shut about them knowing each other. He's not happy about because he said to tell Tony, we do not know each other, don't tell him about that. So Ian's obviously pissed off. And Vincent's saying how, he didn't say... he said he wouldn't hurt his mother. So now Vincent's mother is under threat, maybe even being held hostage. So this episode confirms that Ian is a terrible person, which I love seeing because, like, we had a lot of suspicions about him. We've had a lot of, going on with him. And this episode finally confirms that, yeah, he's a terrible person and he's done a lot of really bad shit. So Tony arrives to meet Ian, and as you guys can tell, most of this episode takes place in the past. There's not a lot of this episode in the present. There actually isn't, which I really like. So Tony arrives to meet Ian. He has no idea that Ian is already a step ahead of him, and he tells Ian that he knows he's in cahoots with Vincent, that he ought to call his lawyer because the cops are going to arrest him. So sirens are blaring, a fleet of cop cars pull up to the bar. It's really crazy, and they make the arrest for assault, and Laurent cuffs him, and Tony loses his shit that's expected, because it seems like every time he goes into a bar, he, like, loses his shit, basically. And of course, he's been suspected while the cops ignore the real danger. You know, they're freaking out and everything. So, meanwhile, in Paris, Julian is still interrogating Rini, and she's now connected to the Romanian sex and drug trafficking crime ring via her brother, now deceased brother, and the undercover cop infiltrating the group, Anton, aka Leon. And thanks to Julian, she's also a newly recovering heroin addict, and he wants her to go get intel from her brother on ringleader and a person of interest, Carrie Sieg, the guy whose van was caught on camera parked outside the house where Oliver was kidnapped. So they're definitely getting closer to revelations here and any possible involvement with Oliver. So this was very well done what they did here. I really like this. We get it's sort of like two scenes at once. One is in the present. We see alternate between Rini in 2006 and then Rini in the present, where we saw last week. She is also set to help Julian get intel on the crime ring Oliver from her now estranged brother. But right before their meeting, her fear of her brother of revisiting that life of retribution wins, and she backs out. So you can tell that she does not really want to be involved because she's worried that, you know, her brother's going to revisit that life and everything. She doesn't want to revisit that life. As I said last week, she's trying to get away from that life, almost like what Emily's trying to do. So the question is, did she back out last time? Because it kind of seems like she did. It seems like they haven't really gotten anywhere with her, so I wouldn't be surprised if we found that out. So Tony is completely livid, as he is with anyone who threatens to stand in the way of him finding his son. He's freaking out about it, because that's just how Tony is. He's so into finding his son. So back in 2006, the cops have wrangled Tony into the station. He sees the result of his handiwork now, and we see Vincent. His eyes are swollen shut, his face is bruised and cut up, and Tony calls Emily at the hotel and tells her he needs her to find somebody in London, and he leaves at the part about how he's calling her from a holding cell because he's been arrested for assault. He doesn't tell her that. So he gets an unwelcome visitor, Ian, who of course is still pretending like he just wants to help him. He's still acting like a very innocent guy, and Tony totally is not buying it about this time. And he tells Tony the story about Snowy, who was a huge white dog he had when he was young. And Snowy was gentle, but one night out of fear and impulse, she bit off a chunk of the neighbor's leg and had to be put down. And Tony, obviously, and I like that what he's trying to show him is that Tony is that dog. And I like what he's kind of trying to show him here, is that if Tony keeps doing what he's doing, he's eventually going to end up dead. Do I think Tony's going to die in the show? Yes, I do think Tony is going to die, because of the kind of track record he has. But even though we know Ian's a bad person, he does have a point. I mean, what Tony is doing is going to get himself killed. He is. He's done this all his life, and it's going to get him killed, and he hasn't changed. So he's so pissed at him, he doesn't want to listen to a word he's saying, and Tony asks Ian a question, and I like that he asked him this, because, of course, we've all been wondering this, of course, and I like that he asked him this, because, of course, Ian told him that story, and we weren't really sure if it was true or not, if he was lying about it, because he said the same exact thing as Ian, and basically he asked her why Molly, you know, his daughter, didn't just walk out of the house that night, and that's why this episode's called Molly. And he basically says that, you know, he took her, and he asked if he took her, and he says that Ian's sick and everything, and Tony serves his metaphor right back to him, and he says, dangerous animals like, and I love he says to him, and it's so true what he's saying, he says, dangerous animals like you need to be put down, Ian, and I'm just like, that was awesome what he said to him. So, meanwhile in Paris, Rini is meeting her brother and a cohort at a cafe in Paris, wearing a bug, while Julian, a colleague, nervously listens in from across the street. Julian senses something's not right, though. And just seconds in, things go south very, very fast. The guy who came along with her brother, he came along to slash her throat and run, presumably because the crime ringleaders know she's working with the cops, or suspect she is, because she was dating a guy who, unbeknownst to her, was a mole for the cops. And Julian does his best to stem the profuse bleeding, hands clenched over her throat like he's choking her, and later grills Rini's brother, but he won't budge. And I thought that was interesting. You know, he says, you really think I will tell you what happened to Anton and my sister? So I think that's really interesting. But the guy does have a point, definitely. So I understand why he's not telling him, but still. So then we see that the person that Tony sent Emily to meet is actually Ian's wife, who is living alone in England now, and is also, of course, the woman from the beginning of the episode. And obviously, and as I said, I love that things are finally getting done in the past, because the past has kind of been Tony. We find out this about Tony. Emily cries, but that's not what's going on here. Now they're working as a team. So now I have no idea like how their marriage split apart. I don't think I can really tell. However, the thing at the end of this episode, yeah, I can tell definitely. So when Emily goes to meet Ian's wife, things are definitely weird, because the woman is sounding like she never really sees him that much. He's always away on business, and she also insists she has no idea who Emily is, despite her image being, and it's weird because, like, Emily's all over the place, so how would she not know who she is? So, in my opinion, I'm like, she is hiding something. There's clear evidence that she is hiding something here. So, especially when Emily asks her point blank whether they questioned Ian after their daughter's mysterious disappearance or not. And her expression immediately, sours as she realizes her visitor's true intentions. And she's like, will you leave my house now, please? And Emily but she never told her last name. So clearly she is hiding something, and she knows something about Emily, but there's something she doesn't want to tell her. And Emily basically is saying, you know who I am, don't you? So why are you lying to me? And she takes an aggressive step towards Mrs. Garrett, and just for a moment, not Mrs. Garrett from the Facts of Life, not that Mrs. Garrett. I know when I hear Mrs. Garrett, that's what I think of, but not that Mrs. Garrett. And just for a moment, we see a flicker of the same kind of unhinged fury that Tony's unleashed so many times in the face of people lying or evading him. And it's cool that Emily did this, because we've seen Emily not be very violent. It was cool to see Emily kind of do that, because it was cool to see Emily just, like, switch that. And I kind of feel like that's why Emily is trying to get away from that. And that's why she married Mark, because she's afraid that she is going to turn into her husband. And she knows that her husband, she doesn't know that he is being arrested for assault. So I feel like that's why she's trying to get away from it all, is because she doesn't want to turn out like Tony. So we go back to the future to the Garrett's boat, and the couple get into an argument about the living situation they're in, which is clearly Ian's fault. And then basically she then snaps at him and says, don't you ever talk down to me after what you did. And so that's really big. So definitely he is a child predator, which, but of course that leaves us asking, why did Ian put up that reward money and needlessly involve himself in the case back in 2006? And also, why didn't his wife just pack up and leave? I don't understand how you could love someone like that. I mean, I totally understand, like, she really wants to be with him, but still, like, why would she stay with him? Clearly, there's something that they're hiding. So, we then get to a confession, which is the same exact way Tony was wrongly suspected. He has been outweighing the obvious, that Ian is a bad guy in the same way Vincent is, but now those mixed feelings are gone, and that's really interesting. So, we go to a short bedroom detour of a Parisian girl named Monique, who is a strange sight in itself. And Tony is intimate with her, which was interesting. I didn't expect that to happen. And he learns that Rini has changed her mind. She agrees to go meet her brother, whom she hasn't seen for years at his apartment. And she's wearing a wire while Julian's listening in. And again, things go south. So, but this time, it's Rini with a knife at someone's throat. And I thought that was really interesting. And her brother spills that Carrie is now living in Brussels. So I thought that was very interesting that we saw that. And I was definitely very surprised with that. So then the rest of the episode mostly takes place in 2006. And this is when the episode gets amazing. The way this episode ends is fantastic. It's intense. I love it. I love the way this episode ends. Tony, we see him in 2006, he's out on bail, and he's desperate to prove Ian's involvement in Oliver's disappearance. And basically, he breaks into his boat, anchored off the deck, just as Ian's car pulls up next to his on the edge of the property. He finally gets his hands on the gun he's been searching for lo and behold, there's the video camera. And at the moment he gets on the boat, he sees with Tony's gun in his hands, and for the first time, we see Ian scared. Every time he's been with Tony, he seemed like a very calm person, but now he's actually revealing his true intentions. And immediately he's like, you've got it wrong, it's not what you think, he's panicking and everything. And basically, Tony's watching the tape, he's disgusted, but it's not Oliver. And this was an amazing reveal of what we found out. We see a horrified look on Tony's face, and we find out that basically, Ian basically, like, raped his daughter, basically, he, basically Ian swears he didn't take Oliver, never even met him, but admits that there are over 50 more tapes like this one. And I'm just like, dude, you're becoming more suspicious. Just saying you didn't kidnap Oliver is fine, but saying there are 50 more tapes, yeah, you've said too much, definitely. You've already said too much, and something bad's gonna happen. You can tell that something bad is gonna happen in this scene. While this scene was going on, like, something bad is gonna happen here, because they've been focusing way too much on the past in this episode, which I loved. I love they focused mostly on flashbacks. But still, they've been focusing so much on that and not as much on the present that you can just tell that something bad is gonna happen. So, and it's just like, how has this guy never been caught? That's the question. And his daughter, that, basically disappeared, and he missed that Molly was a mistake, and he gives a monologue about how the only reason rich people do good things is because they feel, and I think this is interesting, what he said, is because they can feel guilty about all the people they trampled over to get to the top. There's no such thing as human kindness. So apparently his way of repenting for all of his children he's molested and raped was by using his wealth to help find Oliver. Which is really messed up if you think about it. I mean, basically what he's doing is just making up for all the times it's like, oh yeah, I raped all of these children, but I'm not gonna rape Oliver. I wanna help him because I haven't raped him, so I'm gonna go help find him. Seriously, he's severely screwed up in the head. And Tony's basically saying exactly the obvious. He tells him he's a rapist, he's a murderer, he's a pedophile. And I agree with what Tony said. Why should we believe, why should he believe that he didn't do the same thing to Oliver that he did to Molly? I mean, think about it. He's making himself, like, much more suspicious. He's making Tony, and Tony, keep in mind, is getting more and more upset as this goes on. And just his acting, oh my god, acting this episode was just fantastic. I mean, just really, really fantastic acting this whole episode. I thought it was just fantastic. So, he basically, but Ian says probably the worst thing he could have said. When he said this, I'm like, you're dying. You're, okay, and I'm like, he's not gonna die, because we clearly see him in the present. And Ian says he was beautiful, wasn't he? And this makes Tony just go off. You can believe, like, he's completely, like, upset about what he said. He's disgusted about what he said. So because this, he starts to repeatedly bash Ian's head against the hard interior of the boat over and over again until he seeps blood and his body goes limp. And it was cool to see Tony for about 1 second before realizing that he's going to hate himself for doing this. You can just tell he's going to. And he's now murdered a serial child rapist, and it's pretty morally sounded, but it's still murder. Even though he's killed someone that was wanted, that should be wanted for should have been arrested a while ago. Nobody else knows that he's done this stuff. I mean, they know that he has had these all child pornographies and things like that, but it's still murder. So now Ian won't even be forced to face what he's done in a courtroom. He could potentially even get away from with a clean reputation. And my question is, how the hell did he survive that? That doesn't make any sense. How the hell did Ian just survive something like that? That doesn't make any sense to me. So we go back to the present one last time, to Ian and his wife's boat, and at first you think there's, it's exactly what I'm thinking. I see him and I'm like, how the hell did he survive that? I mean, think about it. Literally, this is how hard Tony, like, pounded him against it. It was like, that's how hard, like, watch my Big Brother 16 rant where I, like, pound a ball on the table. That's how hard he pounded Ian's face against that boat. That's how hard he pounded it. And, like, just because of that, you wouldn't think he survived it, but he did. So, but then we see the steward tells his wife that there's someone here to see her, and obviously people don't just casually drop in on private yachts in the middle of the ocean. This does not make sense. And somehow it does, though, because we see the too beautiful to be true ocean fades to a depressing sterility of a mental hospital, and we see she's now she's sitting in a wheelchair staring out the window, and her guest is Vincent. And basically, we see that none of this is real. She's not actually on this yacht. She is in a mental institution. And that twist I thought was amazing. I love that they did that, because the whole episode I'm just thinking, how can he still be alive? And we realize that, no, he's not. Tony killed him. Tony killed Ian, and that's why we have not seen him in the present, which is genius writing. That is genius writing right there. It was not what I thought it was at all. I thought, like, he was in, like, I thought Vincent killed him or something. I thought that maybe he was shot by, like, a cop or something. I thought maybe he was arrested and then put in an electric chair. That's what I was thinking. Or maybe he was, like, claimed to be the main suspect and then he wasn't. That's kind of what I was thinking was going on, but it's not what's going on. It's that he is dead. But her guest is Vincent, and he's come to fulfill a promise he made to himself years ago to get revenge on Ian by one day telling everyone he ever loved what kind of a monster he really was. But realizing her, basically, Mrs. Garrett's mental state, it's clear she already knows exactly how monstrous he was. And he says he can see he's too late. But my question is he going to try to do this? Because we've clearly seen all season that Vincent has been trying to clear up the bad guy he was and is trying to turn into a good person again. And I'm wondering if he's going to be successful at that. I can definitely see that happening. So the episode ends with a voiceover of Vincent talking to Miss Garrett, or mostly himself, about how it's better not to get trapped in the past. And it really shows what kind of character he's trying to be. He talks over a monologue that includes Rini returning home to her boyfriend. I love the way this episode ended. Rini returns home to her boyfriend, hopefully putting her past behind her once and for all. We see the murder scene back in 2006, Ian's lifeless body, the blood splatter on the wall, the dazed look on Tony's face. And this is why Tony is trapped in the past. This is why Tony will not let go of the past, and that's why he hasn't changed, which is genius writing. And honestly, it feels like it's not about finding Oliver anymore. It seems like it's more about the kind of person Tony's become and, like, how he's never going to change now. But this episode just, oh my god, this was the best episode so far. I loved it. There are so many questions now that I have to ask. Is Vincent going to do this? Is Vincent going to do this? Is he actually going to go on this mission and tell people how bad of a person Ian is? I don't know if he's going to. He said he doesn't want to be trapped in the past, so we really don't know what's happening there. So that's going to be interesting to see, definitely, if that's not really what's happening. But we'll have to see what happens there, basically. My other question, of course, is that, what is going to happen with Rini? Clearly, she wants to see her brother again, but clearly she's on a more dangerous path now, so that's going to be interesting to see. Also, do you think Emily got away from Tony because she was afraid she was turning into Tony? We got, like, one small thing of her in this episode. We got one small thing of her, basically. We also saw, I thought there was, some really great scenes and stuff, so definitely, I love this episode, closed out the Ian thing, but again, it's really not about finding Oliver anymore. It's really not. It's more about just sort of, like, these missions that people are going on, and the kind of person Tony's becoming. Definitely is very interesting. And as I said, this episode really felt like a finale. It really did, because now we have a lot of reveals, but we still have questions. Is Tony going to ever tell someone about this? Which I kind of feel he is. I feel like Tony is eventually going to tell someone, hey, I murdered Ian Garrett. I don't know if Julia knows that or something, but I don't think anyone knows. I don't think anyone actually knows that Ian was killed. I don't think anyone actually, and I think that's interesting if no one does know that. Is Emily possibly, is he possibly going to tell Emily? Now, this does make sense why Emily and him got divorced, because Emily probably found out about it, and she was probably terrified of him. That's probably what was going on there. But again, I love this episode focused more on the past, because we actually haven't gotten a lot of it. We got a lot more in the present, but I really love that it focused more on the past. Also, Mrs. Garrett, do you think that she is going to help Vincent with this somehow? I feel like she's somehow going to help him. We focused so much on her in this episode that I could definitely see Mrs. Garrett helping him. I could definitely see that happening. That definitely is a possibility. Also, I'm kind of thinking that Ian was possibly the person that did, possibly do something bad to Oliver, and that's why Tony is so upset. But if they did that, that'd be a weird twist, definitely. I definitely don't think it's Vincent. I honestly have no idea who it is right now. It doesn't even seem like the show's about who murdered him anymore. It's not even not murdered him, but kidnapped him. It's not even about that anymore. It's now about, other things we're finding out, which I really like, and I definitely really love that about this episode. But overall, guys, this episode was amazing. I loved it. Let me know what you guys saw of this episode. I was kind of losing faith in the show, but this episode pulled me right back in, and now I'm totally into the show, and I love everything that's going on. But that's basically my review. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for another movie review. So I'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.